Hey friends, welcome to the Strangers in Common podcast. I hope this finds you well, and if you're not well, that's okay. I'm here for you. So let's get to know somebody that you don't. And that person today is going to be me, your host, your co-pilot, whatever you want to call me. Anything works. So, since this is the first episode and I'm not known as the best storyteller, we'll kind of take it as it goes and see how well I do. So bear with me. We'll start, I guess, with the basics. So my name is Neil. It's a pleasure to meet all of you. We'll just say somewhere between the 40s and 50s, in that range. I was born and raised in Colorado. If you're not familiar with Colorado, we're known for mountains and super thin air. And while we have a lot of outdoor stuff, skiing, hiking, things like that, I'm definitely more of a homebody. I like writing a lot. I do a little bit of journaling, stuff like that. I love traveling. Haven't done a ton of it. I love watching wrestling. Yes, yeah, I know it's a soap opera. I also love video games, the older ones. And just hanging out, hanging out with friends, hanging out with family. Me and my wife have been together for 15 years. We have 4 girls. And the first thing everybody asks me or says is, man, 4 girls, how do you manage? My answer to that is simple. I'm surrounded by beauty. Now, while I look at that now and I'm able to see beauty in most everything around me, that wasn't always the case. It took a long time for me to get there. It was a struggle. I struggled a lot with depression and anger and stuff like that. So I guess that's kind of where we'll start off with everything. I was raised by 2 hardworking, loving parents. However, like a lot of people, we grew up pretty poor. My dad did warehouse work and stuff like that. Worked overnights, so he was home with us during the day. My mom was a waitress, worked evenings. That way she could help out during the day as well. But back then, those weren't fantastic paying jobs. So we grew up on food stamps. We grew up shopping at thrift stores before Macklemore and Angsty Teens made it cool. And it was rough. They worked very hard, and as the oldest child, there was a lot of times that I took care of my siblings. And the thing with that is, as a kid, you're not mentally prepared to take care of somebody else. You can do it, and a lot of kids do it. However, it comes across as unfair at times. You think, why do they get to do whatever they get to do and I have to have the responsibility? And it's definitely okay to think that, but as a kid you can't vocalize that. It caused a lot of anger in me, that I never dealt with. It put a chip on my shoulder, basically, where it was like, I don't understand why I had to take care of everybody. So with that, between that and then starting school, and here's the thing with school. I was little. I was, scrawny. I had blonde hair, almost white. So I was a towhead, if you ever heard that term. So I was an easy target. And I got bullied a lot in school. And looking back on it now, I understand, it probably wasn't directed at me for my looks. It was more of everybody trying to be accepted, and some people only knowing, hey, I don't want someone making fun of me or picking on me, so I'm going to pick on them first. And obviously at the time, as a kid, you don't understand that. And, it caused Again, it caused a lot of stuff inside me that I didn't know how to vocalize as a kid. Nobody explained to me how to talk about my feelings or anything like that. Being raised as a boy, it was, you don't discuss your feelings. You push them down. You don't worry about it. You're stronger than that. And whew, man, that bottling up holds a lot in. Like, there was a couple times in my childhood that I, threatened suicide. I grabbed a knife, and again, maybe it was just a cry for help at that point. Maybe I didn't want to hurt myself. Maybe I just wanted someone to talk to me. And, my, admittedly, my memory is not fantastic. There's a lot of reasons for that. But, it wasn't stuff I did in secrecy at that time. It was going to the kitchen and grabbing a knife and threatening myself because I just wanted to be heard. When you're getting picked on, when you have all this stress on you and you don't know how to let it go, you don't know how to get rid of it, it's hard. It's hard to get somebody to see it, especially when everybody has their own problems. So that was a real struggle as a kid, especially elementary and junior high, because those are rough times trying to figure out who you are, and especially if you don't fit in with a group or something, and you don't, maybe you don't look like other kids, or you don't have the name brand stuff or the nice stuff because your family just can't afford it. Like, you don't understand that stuff until you're older. And I didn't understand that. I didn't understand why I had hand-me-downs. I didn't understand why I couldn't get the name brand shoes or anything. Like, I knew we didn't have a lot of money, but I didn't grasp all that. I just grasped that I didn't have it, and it was making my life hell. And so I managed through there. I at the ripe old age of 12, my friends introduced me to cigarettes, and I started smoking those because I thought, I'll maybe if I smoke, then I'll be accepted. Obviously, I wasn't, and that turned into a terrible habit that I kept for way longer than I should have. As I moved into high school, I that was that was a time I dreaded, because going from getting picked on all the time and stuff to now these older kids, it's scary. It's really scary. And so when I got to high school, I actually met a group of people that became lifelong friends. They were great. They accepted me for who I am, and everything was going decent. I don't want to say good, because I don't feel the school was ever good. However, in high school, I kind of lost my passion for learning, and my grades faltered. I worried more about hanging out with my friends than I did school. I was happy that I was finally accepted by somebody or by a group of people, and that was more important to me than anything else, because that was my escape from everything. If when I was hanging out with that group, I didn't have to worry about my home life. I didn't have to worry about people picking on me, because these people protected me, basically. I didn't have all the stress and stuff. And it was great. It was the first time in my life that, I felt, I guess, comfortable. I felt at ease for a while, even if it was for an hour. And like, I made sure I really wasn't home during those times, because home was chaotic. Home was not the place I wanted to be at that time. So it was super rough. During that time is when I found alcohol and smoking weed. And, again, that was a release basically for me. It was a way I could forget everything. It was a way I didn't have to worry about stuff. And I did that for way longer than I should have. And especially starting, at a young age, it was not good for me. Um, it was fun, mind you. I have a lot of stupid stories with my friends because of those things, but I mean, it's stuff I wouldn't really trade. I might have stayed more away from the drugs and alcohol, but those times I look back on fondly. Um, so we went through high school. I didn't graduate. I dropped out. I tried to make it and I tried to go. I got bored and nobody really wanted to help me there. When you're doing stuff and you again, it's kind of one of those things where if they see you struggling, you want somebody to reach out and say, "Hey, what's going on?" You don't want to be the person that opens up about it. You would rather have somebody ask you first before you open up. You can't just go and lay your soul bare and be like, "Hey, I'm struggling with this. Help me," because that's not how we're taught, unfortunately. We're not taught to seek help. We're not taught to ask. We're taught to just hold it in. And then if somebody asks, you can open up, maybe, but it's not how it is. Um, I didn't I didn't threaten suicide or anything like that I remember during my high school years. Again, I was more comfortable in high school than I was any other time. And again, it's because I was away from everything. I didn't have all the responsibilities. I had a job, yes, but I didn't have to take care of people. I didn't have to worry about going home and, if everyone's stressing about money or if this or that is happening. So I was okay during those years, with the exception of drinking more, than I should have. Um, After high school, I didn't have a lot of direction. I didn't have a diploma. I didn't have really anything I wanted to do with my life. It was just kind of coasting and drinking and hanging out. And then at 18, my father got diagnosed with cancer, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Um, it didn't, it hit me at the time how severe it was because it was stage 4. Um, and I knew that I had to be back home a lot for that because chemo and stuff like that obviously really takes a toll on a person's body. Um, I watched him. I watched him as he lost weight because he was a big guy, and I watched him as he lost his weight, and he still tried to work. And I watched him deteriorate for a year, which was tough. It's the guy you look up to, the guy that raised you, and like he was young. He was late 30s, and this disease just took him. And I didn't really know how to handle that at all. Like, I had no clue how to even deal. That was the first time I dealt with a close family member dying. Um, I had my great grandmother pass and stuff, but when you only see those people occasionally, it doesn't hit as hard as someone you see every day. As it doesn't hit as hard for as someone who's raised you, because it's it's impossible to describe the grief on that. It's It's heartbreaking. It's devastating. It feels like you'll never recover from it. You will, obviously, and it'll always be with you. But in the moment, man, it breaks you. And without having the tools I needed to be able to communicate with anybody or anything else, I turned to alcohol. That was how I dealt with it. I drank, and some nights were heavy, some nights wasn't nothing at all, but I didn't know what else to do. I had some friends there, that talked to me and stuff, but it wasn't really talking. It was, hey, how you doing? Oh, I'm okay. All right, let's hang out. It wasn't opening up and telling anybody anything, because again, it's not how I was taught. I wasn't taught to talk about emotions. It wasn't taught that it was okay for me to cry or show anything. Like it was tough, and so it was something that I bottled up for a super long time. Um, I didn't talk to anyone about it for years and years. I didn't talk to my mom about it, and I'm sure it broke her too. Like it was rough, but I didn't know how to be there for other people. I didn't know how to make myself available. I didn't know how to deal with my trauma and everything else. You know, and and the thing is, like, when when you when you're dealing with that, um, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought on that. When you're dealing with it, and you have to take care of other people too, it's impossible. So I went years with drinking and everything, um, and then in my 20s, at 23, um, I found out that I was going to be a father. So my first child, and obviously that scared the crap out of me. Like, how am I supposed to take care of a kid when I don't even know how to take care of myself at this point, right? Um, so it was thoughts running through my head at first, like, oh my god, do I need to put the baby up for adoption? Like, do I need to do this? Do I need to do that? Because I was scared, man. Like, your your first kid, you know, you're like, how do I do this? Obviously, I didn't put my daughter up for adoption or anything. I didn't make any of those choices. My daughter was born, and I had to go through a very long process of getting custody of her. I had to go through the courts. I had to go through Child Protective Services. It's a lot. There's a lot of stuff to unpack in that story alone. Where I had to prove I was a fit father. I had to, you know, jump over hurdles and go through all this stuff just to make sure I can get her. And it took me 6 months of her life before I was able to have custody of her. And I've had her ever since. So 20 years ago, she's been by my side, and she's been through by my side through all of it. In these 20 years, because after she was born, I really stopped drinking. For the most part, I would have some beers here and there, but I stayed away really well from the hard alcohol because I had I I had a person to take care of now. You know, someone depended on me, so I couldn't be who I was anymore. I couldn't be this person drinking and partying and going out. What I failed to realize is that when I stopped drinking, my depression kicked in super bad. I didn't have anything to chase it away. And I'll be honest, there was times that I laid on my couch and I didn't want to do anything. I didn't want to get up and take care of my daughter. I didn't want to live life. I just didn't want to do anything. I just wanted to melt into that couch and fade away. Like I didn't want to die because I had someone depending on me. So that wasn't my thought process, but it was, man, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to get out of this funk. I just want it to go away. I just don't want to be. And I struggled with that again for years because I didn't know how to deal with it. So I found myself in very, very toxic relationships, like from one to the other, just trying to find something that worked, and none of it worked. Everything I got into was, and I say toxic, and I'm not going to put it all on one person because I probably was not the greatest partner to have. Like, I was probably not easy to deal with. And when you get two people who aren't willing to communicate or able to communicate, it doesn't create a good relationship at all. And so during those relationships, because I wasn't drinking, I I, I had to find some other way of dealing with my pain and my anger and my depression. And that's what started me cutting on my arms, and I I can honestly say I probably haven't done it as bad as other people have. I've talked to many people who are cutters that I know have deep and hurting scars on their body. I always made sure never to cut myself that deep where it left scars. I didn't want that, so I would still bleed and stuff, and it's stupid, but it was almost an endorphin rush. It was like doing drugs, or it was like drinking alcohol. It made me feel better, and I would write. Yeah, I would write down my feelings and everything, and I would try that, and that worked sometimes, but it wasn't the same. It wasn't that same feeling of, here we go, like, you feel better now. It's out. Um, and that happened for a while, and like I said, I was writing down my feelings and stuff, and I was in a relationship at the time. It was coming towards the end of the relationship. I knew that. And I had written down a page of my feelings, of how I felt about everything, about myself, about my depression. I I laid myself bare on that paper, and I gave it to the person I was in the relationship with. And as soon as I handed it over, the response was, "I don't have time for this shit." And they threw it away. And that broke me. That absolutely crumbled everything, because the one time I opened myself up, it 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 got literally trashed, and I didn't know how to deal with it. I lost it. Like, I I cut myself pretty bad that night. Um and shortly after that, the relationship ended, and I decided that I finally needed to get into therapy. So, because I didn't know what to do anymore. Like I didn't know how to function. I didn't know how to be a human being at that point. Like I had no clue where to go. I had no idea how to do anything. Excuse me. So I seeked out therapy, and it took me 28 years to do that. 27, somewhere around there. And I wish I would have done it way sooner. You know, my therapist explained to me that, hey, it is okay to tell people your feelings. It's okay to set boundaries. It's okay for all of it. It's okay to be emotional. It's all right. Like it's okay that you feel these ways. Like they're completely fine. And after that, something just clicked. Like I don't know how to explain it. It was like a weight almost lifted off my shoulders. And you know, I went for a while. I stopped going, which I shouldn't have. I should probably still go, to be honest. I don't think that honestly anybody gets better after a handful of sessions. You know, this life is complicated. There's a lot of stuff, you know, and there's stuff that comes up all the time. I think therapy should be an ongoing thing, to be perfectly honest with you. So after going to therapy, you know, I started living a little different. Like I was happier and everything like that. And you know, then I met what would be my wife. And I'll be honest, if I didn't go to therapy and I would have met her, we wouldn't have lasted 15 years. And that's the God honest truth, because I was not a good person, you know, between all my past and everything, and you know how I treated people, because I was always under the mindset of almost hurt them before they hurt you, you know, before therapy, because I had been hurt so much. So let's hurt somebody before they hurt you, and that's a terrible way to think about things. Like that's absolutely horrible. But if I hadn't gone to therapy, it wouldn't have lasted. And you know, my wife had 3 daughters when I met her, and those became my daughters. You know, after we met, that was my family. Those were my girls. It's never wavered in that. You know, and it's my oldest I met when she was 11, and my youngest I met when she was 2. And you know, it's always been, those are my girls. And you know, I understand people have had questions like, well, but you've only been together 15 years. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if they came from me or anything else. Those are my girls. So they've been, sorry, they've been rocks in my life, all 4 of them, the whole time. They may drive me nuts, and that's completely fine. I'll take it every day. Every day they can drive me nuts, and I will gladly welcome them with open arms. So with being with my wife, it was a relationship where we had to work on stuff. We both came from very traumatic backgrounds with relationships. We both carried a lot of baggage into our relationship with each other. And while I had been to therapy, I still wasn't great at communicating. We were, you know, in our 20s, so neither one of us were great at communication. But we used a lot of patience and, you know, learned how to communicate. We are still, after 15 years, working on communication with each other, and it's a process. I mean, you got to be willing to work on it, you know, and that's every aspect of it. Having a blended family, it takes communication, because one parent could easily say, "Don't talk to my kids like that," and it could blow up into this thing. But if it's worth it, you'll learn how to communicate. You'll have patience. You'll you'll learn how to hold each other accountable without being mean about it. And that's a huge thing. It's, I think a lot of times we just as people just, it, it's almost like it's our way or no way. And it doesn't work when it's like that. It doesn't, especially in a partnership. Like, it can't be your way or no way. It has to be a compromise. And I thank my wife all the time, because man, if she didn't have the patience with me, if she wasn't willing to learn to communicate like I am, if she didn't, if we both didn't want to be better for each other, then we maybe might have made it 6 months, maybe. And I'm so glad that it's lasted 15 years. I'm so glad that I have her as my rock, and I'm so glad that I have my girls as my rocks, because if not, I'm floating away. I'm floating away, and that's the reality of it. If I don't have this stuff, I don't feel I have anything at all. And I feel like that's how probably a lot of people feel in life. Like, if they don't have something, they don't have nothing, right? Like, at that point, you're just sinking, is what you feel like. And it's okay to feel like that. Like, it's all right, because there will be something. I know there will be something. You have to find it. And it might be a spouse, it might be a job, it might be something completely different. It might be something you're passionate about, like an art or music, or who knows. But there's always gonna be something. There's never nothing for you to hold on to. There's a lot of stories I could tell about my life that I didn't really cover. There's stuff in my childhood that led, other than the bullying and stuff like that, there's other stuff that led to me, like, threatening suicide. Um, there's been hardships in my marriage that, I could talk about, if I don't obviously want to put anyone on blast or anything, but I'm not the easiest person to deal with. So, that's caused some hardships. There's been struggles with money. There's been depression even when I'm happy. And, I've had to learn to deal with that. It's that whole thing of how I try to see the beauty in everything, even when you feel like you can't. Like, because it's got to be something, right? There's got to be something beautiful that we can look at, like, even outside, inside, whatever. Like, it's got to be there, because the world's not always dark and gray. It may seem like it at times, and I get that, but it's not always that way. And I'm sure as this podcast progresses that you'll hear more of my stories. I don't doubt that at all. Like, I'm sure stuff will come up that probably I forgot about, to be honest with you, as I talk to people. Who knows? I mean, if you couldn't tell, I get emotional over stuff, and at times I'm a big crybaby, which that's perfectly okay. I'll do my best not to bawl and sob on the podcast because nobody wants to hear that, I'm sure. Um, and it doesn't always, when we're talking, it doesn't always have to be about the bad. I don't want it to always be about the bad, right? It's got to be a balance. So when these conversations occur, it'll be both. Like, I want to hear some jokes. I want to hear a stupid dad joke, like, why can't you hear a pterodactyl in the bathroom? Because the P is silent. Like, stupid stuff like that. Um, that we can laugh at. Because, again, it's not all doom and gloom. I mean, there's a lot of good in this world, in this life, There's a lot of good in the day. Like, you walk outside and the sun's shining. Like, that's a positive, right? But hopefully that helped a little bit for getting to know me and where I'm coming from. It may resonate with some. It may completely miss others because we don't all have the same life. There's aspects you might be able to be like, hey, I felt that, or hey, I dealt with that, and that's all we're looking for. Those little things that we have in common, that might lead to bigger things. It might lead to, hey, I have a blended family too, and then we start talking, and we get to know each other, and then who knows, we're friends for life. At that point, I mean, if you're listening, you're gonna be my friend anyways, because it's just what I'm gonna call you. So, hopefully with this, it put us a little more on the same page. Hopefully, listening to me babble for what looks to be almost 40 minutes, gave us a little more in common with each other. And again, this was the first episode, so it's gonna have kinks. It's gonna have, some awkwardness and all that, and I completely understand that. I'm open to suggestions on it, and again, it is what it is. We're just here to learn a little bit more about each other. So, I'm glad you guys took the time to get to know me and, hear some of my stories. If you want, you can reach me on most of my socials. It is Sticko Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. So it's STICO Podcast. If anybody's wondering what that means, I took the ST from strangers, the I from in, and the CO from common. So Sticko is kind of an abbreviation of it. I figure maybe it might be cool if, I call you guys Stickos at some point. You can also shoot me an email. It's at stickopodcast@gmail.com. If you want to get on and talk with me and tell me your story, that would be fantastic. If you want to criticize any of it, that's cool too. Or if you just want to talk, if you need somebody to vent to, shoot me an email. I really don't mind. I'll respond to it as quick as possible. But, like I said at the beginning, I'm here for you if you need it. So, at that point, we'll go ahead and say our goodbyes. So, until next time, be safe and don't be a stranger.